and Jens Turowski, who joined us for a screening and a shared talk on their collaboration between geoscience and art. The works on display in this room next to us, frame of reference 1 and 2, are the result of fieldwork at Taroko Gorge site in Taiwan in collaboration with GFZ German Research Centre for Geoscience and NCTU Disaster Prevention and Water Environment Research Centre. The project, which is commissioned by Taipei Biennial of 2020 and the CKM Center for Art and Media in Karlsruhe, invites critical reflection on traditions of perception, representation, and scientific engagement with the natural world.
Yes, and for those of you who are here for the first time, Loops is an event series that takes place every Thursday evening. I mean, this is the last one for this semester, but it will return in the winter semester here in our studio. It is a collaborative initiative of the Berlin University Alliance and New Practice, the research platform of the MA Design Computation between Berlin University of the Arts and TU Berlin, where we are right now.
So I am happy, excited to welcome and introduce Hsin, who's a Berlin-based artist, filmmaker, and she approaches ecology from the point of view of its close relationship with technology. Her research-oriented artistic practice investigates infrastructures and technologies in which the human and non-human converge, reflecting on practices of map-making, operational photography, and the technical production of geographical knowledge. Her works were exhibited in Centre Pompidou Metz, Taipei Biennial 2020, CKM, Karlsruhe, Kyoto Art Center, UCCA Center for Contemporary Art, Museum of Contemporary Art Busan, and HKW in Berlin, among others. In 2023, she received the Bundespreis für Kunststudierende, which is the federal award for art students. She's also currently showing her work, Particular Waters, at G2 Schaulager in Leipzig.
And we also have the pleasure of having a second guest here for this talk, Jens Turowski. Dr. Jens Turowski is a senior researcher and head of the working group Geomorphology at GFZ Potsdam. And through detailed field measurements, laboratory experiments, and theoretical work, his research considers the physical processes at and near the Earth's surface and their implications for humans. He completed his PhD in 2007 at the University of Cambridge on controls on bedrock channel morphology, after which he worked at the Swiss Federal Institute for Forest, Snow and Landscape Research before joining the GFZ in 2013. And right now we would immediately go over to the screening of frame of reference 1 and 2. And it's over there. And just feel free to experience it. And we will return here in 25 minutes for the artist talk or the shared talk. And if it's a bit crowded, then maybe just take turns watching it. Thank you very much.
Yeah, not yet. It feels like it's not raining, but yeah, it feels like humid. So later you are going to add earthquake.
The field is where scientists collect information. We are there just to watch with our eyes and instruments. an outdoor laboratory, a network of stations along the Wu River in Taiwan. To know what happens beyond what we can see with our eyes, scientists plant instruments in the field. To do that from the detail that we can only get on the ground. Cameras, weather stations, seismometers, solar panels and communication devices to transfer data to the database server in Germany. Goes in without a ripple. But what does the river look like in the database? The data, which is collected from the stations along the river, could be seen as a collection of field views of the river system. The database categorized by the name of the stations, the position of the observer in the landscape system, where is the observer standing? What kind of measurements do we use to perceive when we are situated inside of the system? Scientists work from a local observation, or observe an abstraction or extraction in control settings. Those instruments translate observed phenomena into data. Process of collecting in an open system. To reverse, we could see one form of language in relation to the position of the observer. Pointing to itself. To reveal the structure among the multitude of observations. When we are at small scale, we can take a particular process and we isolate this in the lab. Going from knot to network. Between the field, laboratory, and database. Shifting scales of reference. Integrating fragments towards a whole. Horizontal patterns of relation. The database of a landscape system. Simulation comprises patchy points of view from ground observations. Reading interlocking patterns. Where is the observer standing in the database? What is the system state we look at when we are on the ground? the field of view will be small. Our eyes can recognize the trace of what has happened. I think I don't. I was thinking I needed to turn on, but
So maybe now, after having watched your work, we will just let you go ahead and maybe try to tell us about it and your collaboration, your creative processes, and maybe we'll leave the questions for afterwards. So yeah, just leave you to freestyle.
so maybe I start. And yeah, I think I'm thinking to maybe talk a bit how this collaboration starts and how we met. And yeah, the project is called Friend of Reference 1 and 2. And yeah, as just mentioned that the project was commission project for Taipei Karlsruhe in the Critical Zones exhibition and Taipei Biennial 2020. You and I don't live on the same planet. And both show the curatorial team was Bruno Latour and Martin Guenard. And actually, it's Bruno Latour. Because of him and the idea, that's how this collaboration started. Yeah.
Yeah, Bruno Latour was very interested in critical zone science for quite a long time already. Critical zone science is concerned with the interaction of the different spheres of the Earth. That means the geosphere, the pedosphere, that are the soils, the hydrosphere, like water, the atmosphere, the biosphere, and now all of these interact to support life on the surface of the Earth. The term critical zone, like that's really what is critical about it, is like what supports life. And the term was really coined by the scientific community as a marketing gag. So they wanted to have like a kind of buzzword that ties these things together to leverage funding. That was the background of it. And Bruno Latour was fascinated by this process of the scientists coming up with these specific terms and these things to actually get money to do their research and to do interesting research. And he was traveling a lot at that time, looking at different observatories and talking to scientists, and he was in Taiwan, and he heard that our research group was doing some monitoring there, and so they got in touch at this time. We happened to be there at the same time, and so we met up and we showed him in the field, and that was basically the start of this entire collaboration, which resulted in the end in this project. And Bruno and my colleague Niels Hovius, they really liked each other from the start. I always say they immediately fell in love with each other. And so when Bruno started to set up like the exhibition in Karlsruhe and the Biennale, he approached Niels and asked whether he would be interested to collaborate, or we would be interested with our group to collaborate.
Yeah, so that's how we met, and that's also how I think the beginning was like I heard about critical zones, but as an artist, I've no idea what is critical zones, but I think I learned that one from TKM and Bruno and Martin, like that what they were trying to do, like even they borrowed the term from the scientist community, but then I think they have this idea of inviting artists to be part of the process, and also kind of I think like from the work you see is like me as an artist, and I visit the laboratory in Taroko Gorge, and that's also where that, like, where is the how this thing all start is the observatory in Taroko, and and that also connected to the projects. That's also the process how I try to achieve with the video installation to mapping out this critical zones. Like, I think that at the time they were saying that like the surface of the earth above ground 3 meter, down ground 3 meter, or even more, 3 to 6, I don't know. Yeah, I just have a, like, I remember they were mentioned that it's like it's this range of the space which like human activity can like make influence to the surface of the earth. So it looks like a donut shape of the earth and the skin of the earth, and that's how like the entanglement of life and like earth, and like how we affect the nature environment, etc. And so I think like the first approach I could say with the video installation is how I'm trying to like to observe and also map out these critical zones, like this space of zones, and how I see the scientific work happen, and but from the part of the field work they were doing in Taroko. Yeah, so maybe you can speak a bit about that.
So what are we actually trying to do there? We study landscape processes. I'm particularly interested in physical process at the landscape, so I ask questions like, how does a river work? Why does a mountain look the way it is? Why does it have the shape it does? How do the physical process interact with chemical process, with biological processes? And what we want to do in Taiwan is to observe and study the landscape as an integrated system. So we want to look at multiple components in a larger, like on a scale of a catchment, of a river catchment. And we do that with a set of observations, distributed stations down there, which include cameras, include seismometers, weather stations. We measure soil moisture, specific measurements on rivers, like the amount of water that goes through, the amount of sediment that is carried, and so on and so on. So we have a very broad range of observations that we do there. And at the time when we met, that was early 2020, just before Corona started, we had planned a trip to Taiwan to install new stations, to repair, maintain the stations we already had there, but also to scout and look out for new locations and for new opportunities for geoscience and doing measurements. And so we met just a month before in Potsdam, and then we invited Hsin to come and just to observe what we were doing. And you see that in some of the video imagery. This is my colleague and I looking for things, so working on the stations, installing things, and so on. So this is what we were doing there.
Yeah. So I remember there was, I think how we started is, I think around 3 days or 4 days in Potsdam, and in the laboratory. So we also, there's also another Taiwanese artist called Zhang Yongda, and we both have the project, but we have also different approach. And we were there in Potsdam, and we learned about the laboratory work, and and yeah, visit also some of the colleagues and learn about the project. And later, like I think a month later, I was in Taroko with Jens and also other colleagues together, and to see the field work. So there are two sides of the work we were trying to see, and that was 5-6 days of observing. Like my work is with my crew, observing the scientists and what they were doing in the field, and then I think for me is how this also like how the data, like I think in the video you already see, like also that was with my voice. So I think it's important to have this like position of the observer, which I talk a bit about in the video, like the process or the engagement of the technology or optical technology in the process. And I think that's also one part in the video. From first we start with the field work, and then from the instrument, and as Jens mentioned, like how they plan the instrument and how the network to do the setting, and then how that becomes a network to extract data from the site and in a landscape scale. And that's like really interesting for me at the time, and also to see how the process have been built. And that's usually hard to being seen in the in the scientific paper process. I would say, like, I think I was trying to also not only visualize, but I was trying to understand how the scientific imagery had been constructed through the network of technology and instrument and sensing technology, and what is the role they play. So that go back to the question that also I think at the time I was asking this question, and how does the river look like in the database? And I think that can be also a thing. I think the role of river, like for this project, and also for the project you were doing there in Taroko. I think that's like quite, for me, it's like a starting point to think like the river as a subject in the project. Maybe you can do you want to speak a bit about the role of the river or Liu River, or how you were setting up the station in Taroko, and what is the consideration or what is the questions at the time? Or
Yeah, I could lecture you for an entire evening on that. So I think maybe an interesting thing about what we do is we work a lot with seismic data. We are one of the leading groups worldwide in using seismic data to study Earth surface processes. So every process on the Earth surface that generates noise in some way, that puts the ground into motion, generates seismic wave that travels through the Earth, which we can observe. And the instruments that are there, seismometers, they're extremely sensitive. So just as an example, if we put in a seismometer here into the ground, we can pick up people walking past in about 200-300 meters distance. And you can see the individual steps in the data. When we have a network of these stations in a landscape, we can use that to locate events. So if there's a landslide or like the river processes, we can use the information that out of these waves to say exactly where and when this happened. And so by putting up a network into the landscape, we can observe all these noise-making processes within this network at the same time, and look at the spatial and temporal correlations. And from that we can make inferences about causality. How do they interact? How does a landslide interact with a river, or a river with the hill slopes and cause landslides maybe? And that's what I find fascinating about this method, is that you have this one instrument network and you can really look at the landscape as an integrated system and see at the different interactions. And obviously it's not so easy. If it was so easy, we wouldn't have anything to do, right? It's tough because you need to interpret the data. And I think there's another link to what Hsin is doing. We look at this data and we develop methods to interrogate that and to find the images in there and relate that back to the processes in the landscape. And that's complicated. It's a difficult process.
Yeah, and I think also, I think the work I was trying to do is also much looking in the field work, and that's like about the instrument, and then also site scouting, and also I think maybe we can talk about the creative process, or how this come together.
Say something about, like, you had this scaling idea at the beginning. That was one of your starting points.
Oh yes.
And how you got to to this name, the title, frame of references.
Yeah, I think the first scaling idea, I think the reference at the beginning is actually from Powers of Time, the video from, or animation from Charles and Ray Eames. And I think at that time, or actually the project I did in the past years, is much thinking about the problem of the scale, and or changing or shifting from the scales. And so maybe put it much in a simple way is, I don't know if everyone have seen the video by Charles and Ray Eames, Powers of Time. So it starts from park in Chicago, and then they kind of zoom out to the outer space, and then coming back to the Earth, and then kind of zoom into the skin cell. That's actually like really early like conversation, and also part with Martin and Bruno, because Bruno also wrote about this anti-zoom article called Anti-Zoom, and also it's kind of a critique of this scale problem and zooming problem. So that was something I was thinking about, this shifting of the scale, that there's it wouldn't be, I think that's how Powers of Time is this catching, or people was so convincing, but that is they not only materialize but visualize our imagination of this zooming and zoom out effect. But that's this kind of continuity actually doesn't exist, and there's no that kind of camera. I will hope I have this camera can look into the underground and to another video downstairs to look into what is down there of the sheet of the several sheet of the rock and the layers of the rock. So that was something kind of initial idea to think what is the limitation of the frame, in this different in between different scale of observation, and it wouldn't be this continuous. There's a discontinuity between the difference of the scale changes. That was the part, and maybe you can also see that part what I was trying to do in the frame of reference too, especially this zoom in, zoom out, but there was like I was trying to create of like this feeling of hitting by the image, like when you are falling down from the outer space and then to like back to the Earth's surface, etc. So that was also a kind of image or thing I was trying to do, and that in response to the powers of 10. And yeah, I think then back to frame of reference. Yeah, that's a big tour because this is actually, I think, the two big thing I was trying to look in this project. And I think that's like, I think frame of reference, that was, the title was coming from our conversation in Taroko. And I think we were talking about how to, I think I was like, if I remember correctly, I was asking how to observe river, and like with the scale of the river, I think what they were trying to do is building up the network of a system, like although it's around the river, but not only about the river. But I think at the beginning I was asking that to thinking as a human scale, like how we can observe something which is larger than our being. Of course, we have those optical technology which can achieve or kind of extend the observation scale, and then yeah. So I think that was starting with the question, like how to observe river and how to observe a moving object, etc. And Jens came like have introduced me with the idea of frame of reference, and I think that was the methodology they were using in the work, and also still nowadays.
So one interesting thing about rivers is that they are not only conduits for transporting water, but they also transport sediment, so that rocks, sand, gravel, and so on. And if you can imagine, you have a big river during a flood when it's most active, it's really difficult and it's actually dangerous to go into the river and make observations. And so when we want to understand how much sediment does a river actually transport and we want to measure it, we need to be quite creative to come up with methods of doing that. And this is where this conversation was coming from. There are methods which are, in physics it's called Eulerian, after Euler, the mathematician, and you stand at one point and you watch what is going past you, right? And you can count the particles, for example, that are going past, you come up with methods. But there's also another way of doing that, which is called Lagrangian, and that is you move with the particles. And so there are methods in both of these sense. So we can take particles, we can instrument them, we put, for example, like a motion sensor into them and then put them back into the river, and we basically follow the path from the particle, from the internal perspective of the particle. That's the Lagrangian way. And then the other way is you stand by the river and you have like some baskets or something, you catch the load, or you look at it from other things. And so it's a tricky thing to bring these two perspectives together.
Mm. Yeah, so I think that was the part, like also inspire me to have this switching between these two methods in the camera work in frame of reference. So there were one part like we were so there were like GoPro camera we were using, and also the other digital camera we were using, and we were moving with the camera, and our observing subject is the scientists in the field, and also their work, and also the river. Yeah, so you can, yeah. So so that's I think for me it's important to switch in between these two maxer. There's a fixed observation perspective, and also like the stations, they have this fixed position of the observation point, but also moving with the object they were looking at. Yeah, so yeah, and that's also connected to the framework. Like I think for me also frame of reference, another layer which is catching me is the frame and this framing, like as a way of like not only to say in the camera frame and like only say camera frame, then it's like how we frame this image. But I think it's interesting, it's like what is outside this observation perspective. So I think it's I think that also one part is that I can elaborate or extend is that it's this patchiness of observation, or I think that can also quite have this sense in the frame of reference one. Only you always see the edges of the frame. You always see there's a gap, there's a limitation of the framing, and to say that observation is not this holistic view of everything, but that it's a work of putting things together, putting different perspectives together to patch the different viewpoint to a whole picture. And I think we were talking about that also in GFZ about button up or
Yeah. And another aspect of that is what you observe, right, also comes out of your frame. When we design a network, we have specific questions in mind. And so what we measure, what we observe, is already driven by the concepts that we have. And so it's a constant feedback between the observations, the way you think about it, and then what observations you make. And that's something that is quite in parallel in the artistic work and the scientific work.
Yeah.
Yeah, I
I
think
think
maybe now is a good time to come to the questions. And maybe first of all, thank you for talking about the work. So I think I would already open it up to the audience if anyone already has a question. Otherwise, maybe I would... Oh, yeah, already.
So you talked about examples where you took very concrete words from the scientific world and you found a way to express them artistically. And I'm kind of like wondering if the opposite process ever happened, where you had these set of visualizations that were given to you and they provided actual prototypes to how you were thinking about the scientific structures or maybe the scale of the problem you were working at. Did that other process ever happen?
So I guess that's directed to me, right?
Yeah.
I would say there are two perspectives on this, and the first one is a clear yes. And when you have data, right, like data that comes in, say from a seismometer, it's just a bunch of numbers, right? And so there needs to be a process of visualizing these numbers to make sense of it, right? Because for us, the way we process information is very strongly visual, and we look for patterns in a visualization. So a lot of our work is turning like streams of numbers into the right way of visualizing things. And I think like the way that artists approach this process can be very, very helpful there and give different ways of doing that. We haven't had this feedback in this particular project, though.
Yeah.
Like that's an aspect that has been missing, but I think there's definitely a potential there. Yeah.
Other questions? Over there.
Hello, thank you so much for the presentation, love the work. I just wanted to ask regarding to the component of time and how do you measure time in that sense? You know, it's like just to capture a narrative and the context is very specific. So it's like if you want to archive this, you know, it's like, and you go back to it and compare it to like, you know, another narrative or compare it to another context. What is your structure when it comes to the narrative and when it comes to like the data that you're collecting and comparing with time and space?
It's me or to Jens? I think it's for Jens.
I think that could be directed to both of us, actually. So, what is the process? So our work is set pretty much always in the context of specific questions, and these questions come out of, say, of the flow of the scientific field, right? Let me give you an example, maybe, of some recent work we have done and like the context that is that in. Like one of the things I have done a lot of work on is rivers. So I'm a river scientist. I would say 80% of my work has revolved in some way around river processes and river dynamics and so on. Now, river science originated already in the 18th century from the need of river training, of canal construction and so on. So there's a long, long history in that. Many of the concepts that have been developed in the 17th and 18th and 19th century we still use today. But rivers are incredibly complex beasts. Yeah, they are very complicated, and there are many things which we really don't understand and cannot describe well. So I've had a project which originated just shortly before our collaboration with a student, and this student asked the question: if you have big boulders, blocks of rock that sit in the river, what does that do to the river? How does a river react to the presence of these big blocks, right? And so we set out and designed observations to look at that question. So for example, we found places in the river which were like upstream, downstream of each other, adjacent on each other on the same river, with a lot of big blocks and without any big blocks. And we set instruments on both of them and then had a kind of a relative comparison there between that. And so what we then do is we take these data, the observations that we make, we think about it, contemplate it, we might adjust the observations to some more, and then we put that into a framework. We design a concept, say this is how it works, or this is how we think how it works. That might be conceptual, that might be mathematical, and then we write it up and publish a paper, and then we move on in a sense, right? The data nowadays, they get archived in a public thing. So if you publish scientific work that is publicly funded, we are required to make the data publicly available. Does that answer your question? Or?
I'm talking about the story, just when you want to dig the data and capture it in a story for a specific context, and it's like how you move on to the next. Hello. Yeah, so the story. I don't know. It's just there is an interesting like intersection between data and how it affects the story, and the story also how it affects. So it's like the nonfiction versus the fiction, and your perspective, because you're framing it in your own perspective. So just even if you're collecting the data, still you're eliminating some stuff, and you're.
Yeah, I think this is a really interesting question, because I think that hints at the difference between how we do art and science, and we were talking about this earlier. And the process, creative process, seems to me to be very similar. And so I said to you, Hsin, I think where there's a difference is how we judge the outcome, like what is success and what not. What we try to do in science is we have observations, right? And we try to construct causality into these. So we say, like, these events happened just after each other, one caused the other. Causality is always an interpretation. That's like the frame of reference that you're referring to, or the story we tell with it. But because we construct causality, we can make predictions. We can take this story, this framework that we say, and we say, now if we change some slight things, this is what we expect to happen. And so we have this loop process. So we go back and make new observations to check, right? And this is something that I guess rarely happens, or maybe you can say that, but that's not how I perceive the artistic work. You have a project, you tell a story, then you make something else, right? Rather than saying, okay, can I question or falsify that kind of story in a sense?
I think that's I don't know. It's or at least for me, like there are specific questions or observation. I'm going also like a loop, like always going back to that on different project, but there's something coming back to me, or like I think mostly about river and also water. And but I think that was in also different kind of constellation and also different question I'm asking. I forgot what is the question. Sorry.
The narrative, how
The narratives.
how you archive that and how you move on. Yeah, did I get that right?
Yeah, I think how I archive that is in moving image, in film, and but I think when I heard of the question, I think that was also one challenge I was facing making the work is it's really one part is really frustrated to try, like it's not. I think I learned a lot from Jens and also during the field work, and to learn about the shape of the mountain, how river cut the shape of the mountain, etc. But then that's not possible to tell through this to the camera work we were trying to do there. But that was the one part of aspect I found, but the other thing is I think the field work we were doing is that about archiving is, I think there's one thing in the river, maybe after this sequence, there's this bedrock in Lushui, and you can see the erosion happened like across time span on the surface of the rock. And I think that also they're part of archiving in the material sense, and this scale I was trying to deal with, although with the video as a medium, but there's also part of the material, the observation from the material aspect, which is which content itself in that. And that I think that I was trying to patch them together, and then like framing them in the work. Yeah. I hope
Are you satisfied now? Yeah.
Yes.
Wonderful.
Okay. Any more questions? Okay.
I was wondering, this is probably more a question to Sue, but I was wondering kind of how you make the selection of what material to use in a piece like this, because the way that I imagine it is with like visual data or like this numerical data, it's kind of a huge stream of like uniform stuff, like this flow of data, and then you have to treat it in a sort of non-uniform way. Say, take this snippet and put that in the piece. So I just wonder, like from a process perspective, like how do you maybe make those choices? I don't know if this is a relevant question at all to this piece, but yeah, I always wonder about that stuff.
Yeah, I think, thanks for the question. I think the thing or the selection or even the narrative or even the voiceover what I was building up in the work is all from our conversation and all from the field work. So I think I'm just really trying to put things together, what I see and what I have observed, and also how I was trying to understand their work in the field, and also what fascinating me of the thing I see. So I'm trying to, I think that can maybe go back to the role of the river, and we were around the Liu River, and I think the video itself is also, like, as I mentioned earlier, it's like a map or the work of mapping, and to map out this several events like happened at different places at different time. And so yeah, I think it's, yeah, the work itself is quite complex, but I'm trying to also kind of observing their observation system and then building up my observation network with the medium of the video. Yeah, and yeah, so that also maybe one part I didn't really talk much about is also the question of digital representation in the work. So from data and then to information, and then maybe, as she said, about story, or when they turn into narrative, and what happened in this process, and how it start is like the field work and the data collection, but then how it end up as in the scientific paper or as an artwork. That's also the different trajectory it could go. But I think the question I try to address is, or use the position of the observer to say, is like, I think the question of optical instrument or optical technology, and the role of the technology and play in the observation, and which I find it's really important to mention, and then to also, this technology is also part of the framing. So I think I want to point out, or what I'm trying to achieve in the work is to point out the position of the observer in order to perceive this digital framework or technological framework we have, which is the medium, which is part of the observation, which is not so much have been discussed in the outcomes. Yeah, so that's what I was trying to do in the work.
Yeah, I think my question is somehow also connected to what has been talked about so far. But first of all, I'm really amazed about the combination of the video and then how you guys talk about it. You should do a podcast or so together. It's really amazing.
Yes, you can have a river podcast. I will subscribe.
Why not?
And my question is, I'd say like a little more, like quite general, but I would be curious about your individual answers to it. Because like what I was wondering, how you would describe the role of technology in general in what you do, in your practices, in your way of working. And yeah, how, like you can also, I think, I would be happy if you answer this general question also, maybe in general words. Up to you.
Yeah, that's a really interesting question. And so, like, the first thing that comes to mind for me is, like, if we didn't have all this technology, I mean, we have instruments in there, like, which are worth thousands and thousands of euros, right? Like, very high quality stuff. How would I'm asking myself, how would I do my work? And would it be possible to do that if we didn't have this technology? And I would say, yes, I could do my work. So my background is in theoretical physics, and I need a pencil and some paper, and then I can write equations and stuff like that. I do a lot of kind of classical scientific physical development work as well. In a sense, the technology for us, and I frame that like purposefully in an artistic way now, it's an extension of our senses, right? And what I described before, we use these seismic networks to observe the landscape as a whole and how the different parts of the landscape interact. This is a type of observation that is not possible with any other method that I'm aware of, right? Like maybe the eye. You could stand there and sit there and observe the landscape, how it happens, but obviously you can't do that in a practical manner, and you wouldn't see as much. So, like, really what the technology gives us is an extension of our direct observations that goes over longer time scales, over shorter time scales, over bigger spatial scales, over smaller spatial scales, or very specific aspects of the work. Like we use chemistry as well, so we can use isotope chemistry to trace processes, to trace matter through the landscape in some way. So it's kind of like adding sensory power, and that is what the technology does. And so we get windows into processes, into scales, into the landscape that wouldn't be possible otherwise.
Just a follow-up question: does this also allow you to see the river as an integrated system, like to have all those different data inputs that then are combined, something that creates this rather complex entity?
In the spirit of this project, I would ask back here, and this is also what I ask my students about this kind of questions, is like, what do you mean by an individual system, right? The way you view the landscape is interacting, like it's interacting with the atmosphere, with the geosphere on different spatial and temporal scales. And the river does that as well. You have groundwater inflow, you have matter like organic matter, you have life going on there, fish and algae and so on. And so when you think about the river as an individual system, right, that is already a very specific framing that you are doing. And the specific framing might be useful to answer specific scientific questions, right? And so in a sense, yes, you can look at it as an individual system, but like it's an abstraction of the system of the river or its role in the landscape that can be purposeful. And I have a hard time separating this framing of how we look at the things from the purpose. Like scientific thinking is always for a particular purpose. We are not like just, science doesn't exist by itself. You always build your models and your things for a particular purpose within a particular framework. And so these concepts that you're alluding to, they need to be set like or framed in the concept or context of a particular purpose.
Really amazing. How would you see technology in your practice?
Yeah, I think there was maybe different part, different stage. But I think maybe I just answer with frame of reference. Yeah, I think it's just, I think I've already mentioned about the optical technology, and that was part of the technology, and also like drone and also this map and satellite imagery, etc. I think there was different technology or technique they were using, and that was also part of this like processing of those scientific data and into imagery and into like further discussion. So I think that is at the time, I think for me it's interesting to see the role of those imagery and how it had been created in the fieldwork and also in the laboratory. But I think in the lab it's a bit hard to, for me it's like as a visual artist, it's a bit hard to play with numbers and then graphs. So that was my focus in the fieldwork. But I think that's, yeah, I think at least in the work I'm trying to, as I already mentioned, trying to make it to make the framework clear and you could perceive and how it had been made. And so I think maybe as an example of the ending of the work is the point clouds and the footage, which actually that was the screen capture of that point cloud footage from the computer screen. And I decided to show this patchwork and also like this virtual projection in the software in order to see those backstage of the imagery and the imagery process. Yeah, so I think that at least for me is already saying many times of seeing what is the relation of the observation and what is the role of the technology or technique which is part of the process. So I think from observing the field work and also to at the end of the film is like how that have been, what is the position of the observer have been created with those relations with the technology and observation, like subject objects. Yeah.
Maybe I will ask also something. We've talked about storytelling. We've talked about landscape formation, geomorphology, and also I will bring to those ingredients the idea of the so-called Anthropocene, which is very hip nowadays. And I will ask you in your site specific practices and research. How do you engage with local communities, if you do it like in any way, and how do you do it, and what role do they play throughout the research processes, recognizing that they are also part of these entangled systems and landscapes?
Yeah. I think, yeah, that's also a really good question. And that was also the question I was asking myself in the project. Yeah, I have to say with this project, I didn't have that connection to the local community in Taroko Gorge, and that was part of my thinking in the process, like they were there and they were also part of the landscape. I think only one thing which I think maybe no one noticed, and is like I went to the station, I think it's with the kind of giant tree somewhere. Calabao, yeah. And then I think I went separately. I think after our field work, I went with my parents, and that was the part. I think, yeah, because at the time in the field work, I think we talk about that. It feels like we are in a bubble. Like I'm following them, and then we were here, and then we were moving into like to the places, the sites, etc. And that was also in the process. I was thinking about the local community, like the Taroko tribe, and also the people who living there. And and so like the separate visit, as I mentioned, there's one shot, and there was the part where they were looking for a person who is lost in the mountains, etc. And that was the part, maybe only one part I kind of put it in as part of the event that was happened, but slightly didn't move into the focus point. And yeah, but the other project I usually do with the local community is, I think it's also like this, is I work with the people who is already engaging the local network, and they were working on that. So I think, for example, the project I'm working on now, which is another river in Taiwan, I work with anthropologists, and then through them I meet the local activist group, and then to learning about the water conflict in the region, etc. So yeah, I as a observer, and I have this observing position, so I need some access to the local community and local network in order to asking questions, but also in a way that's important for me to have this situated position, is to have a reflective position, which I think the film is showing our crew, showing ourselves, and showing the camera. So showing the framing of that. And I think in not only this work, but also other work I was trying to do to show the backstage of the framing, the backstage of the observation, in order to be reflective of this. It's not fiction for me, but it can be a fiction in the frame. So this way of breaking the fiction. Yeah. I don't know if I answered.
So I think with that we've reached the end of today's session, which doesn't mean that the conversation has to end, because it can continue at the bar. Sorry, did I? So we would like to thank all listeners here and in the stream, and especially today's guests, Hsin and Jens.
Thank you.
And as this is our last iteration of Loops in this semester, we'd also like to end by giving a few thanks, and I hope I don't forget anyone here. So we want to thank first the Berlin University Alliance, Berlin forscht mit, and Professor Albert Lang for initiating the series.
And we'd also like to thank the curators and organizers, Lars, Emma, Johannes, Federico Friedrich, and especially the great, amazing technical team from Incule, Fang, France, Yawen, Aaron, Joel, Sue, as well as the students of the program. And keep an eye out for the program for the winter semester when Loops returns once again. And for now, you still have the chance to experience the work, which we'll have along the night, and we'll have some beers, so maybe we can also have a chat with beers and installation. So thank you everyone again.
Thank you.